The cuff was already cold against my neck before I understood what it actually did. I am Daniel Whitfield, and 3 weeks earlier I had transferred into the academy from the human training branch on the outer ring, a place where the hardest thing anyone asked of you was to run 6 miles before breakfast. Nobody told me what waited in this new building. Nobody told me, because everyone else already knew, and fear like that does not need explaining twice. Around me, 200 cadets from 9 different worlds sat in a curved hall shaped like a bowl, facing a stage with a single black chair on it. The chair had straps. The straps had stains that no cleaning cycle had ever fully removed, dark rings soaked into the padding like old rust. Beside me sat a cadet named Voss, a lean creature with silver skin and 4 thin arms that never stopped moving. He was shaking. Not nervous shaking, the kind of shaking a body does when it remembers something painful and expects it again. "What is this test?" I asked him quietly. He turned his head slowly, like the question itself cost him something. "You do not know." I transferred in. Nobody explained anything about today. "Then I am sorry for you," he said, and his 4 hands folded together in his lap, gripping so tightly the knuckles under his silver skin went pale. "They call it the threshold assessment. It is the reason half of last year's class is no longer here. Half of them washed out? Half of them left the room and never came back to any class," he said. "Some finished their training on other worlds instead, quietly, without saying why. One of them, a cadet named Sorrel, did not walk out at all. They carried him." I felt something cold move through my chest, not fear exactly, more like a held breath. "What do they do to you?" "They place a device on your neck," Voss said. "It sends real pain through your body, not a warning signal, not a training jolt you can shrug off. Actual pain, the kind your own nerves create when something is truly wrong, except nothing is wrong. The machine is only telling your body that it is, and then they raise it. Higher and higher, while you are asked to keep doing your work, as if nothing has changed at all. How high does it go? No one knows. There is no number written down. Every year they change it, so cadets cannot warn each other in advance. They want to see what you do when your whole body is screaming, and no one is coming to help you." Voss looked toward the black chair on the stage, and something in his gaze reminded me of a man staring at a locked door he knew he would soon walk through. Down the row, a small group of cadets with pale gray skin, the Andrai, sat in perfect stillness, eyes closed, breathing on a slow, steady count, the way people do when they are trying to leave their bodies before their bodies are hurt. Near the front row, an officer from the Coalition fleet sat with her jaw locked so tightly that I could see the muscles standing out along her cheek from 6 rows back. Nobody in this hall looked bored. Nobody looked calm. The room felt like a held breath that had been held far too long. I turned the information over in my mind, trying to make it fit somewhere sensible. Pain, raised with no limit, while you still had to perform your duties. That did sound frightening, said out loud in a strange room full of frightened strangers. But something in me, some old stubborn corner built out of years of small hard things, did not feel the fear the way I expected to. "When I was young," I said, mostly to fill the silence between us, "I broke my arm falling from a tree. I did not cry. I got angry instead, because the tree had won, and I hated losing." Voss stared at me, the way you stare at someone speaking a language you have never heard before. "That is not the same thing." "Maybe not," I admitted. "But it is training, right? A test you can walk away from. That is the whole difference between training and something real." "You misunderstand what this is," Voss said, his voice low and urgent now. "This is not a simulation with limits built in for safety. This is your actual nervous system, telling your brain that you are dying, again and again, while a machine decides how loud that message becomes. And there is no record of what a human body can survive on this test, because no human has ever taken it before you. They will not know where your limit sits. They will only find out by pushing until you stop them." "That is how you find any limit," I said. "You cannot guess it. You have to test it." He looked at me for a long moment, confusion slowly replacing some of the fear on his face, as though I had handed him a piece from an entirely different puzzle than the one he was holding. A voice called 3 names. Mine was the third. I walked down toward the stage with my legs feeling steadier than my thoughts. A small mechanical assistant on quiet wheels rolled up beside me and fitted the cuff around my neck with careful, practiced motions. It hummed faintly. It smelled faintly of ozone and warm metal, a smell I decided not to think too hard about as I sat down in the black chair. The proctor stood above me on the platform, a tall figure wrapped in a formal gray coat, speaking in a calm voice that carried through hidden speakers into every ear in the hall at once. Cadet Whitfield, your task is target identification under a live data feed. 12 shapes will appear. One carries a hostile signature hidden among the rest. You must find it and mark it correctly within the time given. As the test continues, the intensity of the cuff will rise. You may end the test at any point by striking the console in front of you twice. Understood, I said, and I meant it the way you mean anything before a fire alarm goes off. You think you understand until the noise actually starts. 12 shapes bloomed across the glowing display in front of me, pale outlines shifting and rotating slowly. I found the wrong one in 4 seconds. Its edges glowed slightly warmer than the others, a small, careless mistake in whatever had built the false signal. I tapped it. A soft chime confirmed I was right. The cuff activated. The pain arrived like a sudden burn along the back of my neck, spreading down through my shoulders in a wave. It reminded me of the worst sunburn of my life, crossed with slamming my shin into a low table in the dark, except sharper, and it did not fade the way either of those things usually did. I noted it, filed it away as unpleasant but manageable, and looked at the next set of shapes. I found the second hostile in 6 seconds. Slower. The pain had cost me 2 seconds, and that annoyed me far more than the pain itself did. The intensity climbed again. By the 4th round, the burning sensation had grown heavier, a steady weight pressing behind my eyes and down through my chest. My hands had started to sweat against the console edges. And yet, oddly, my accuracy had not slipped at all. If anything, I found myself predicting the pattern faster, learning where the machine liked to hide its little mistakes, the same way you learn where a video game likes to place its traps after enough tries. Murmuring started somewhere behind the glass wall of the observation gallery. I did not have attention left to spend wondering what it meant. By the 6th round, it had become something heavier still, no longer a simple burn, but something closer to pressure building behind my skull, pushing outward with every heartbeat. I bit down gently on the inside of my cheek and tasted a faint metallic sting, and kept my eyes fixed on the shapes drifting across the display. Round 8. Round 9. Somewhere around round 10, I noticed I had started breathing in a steady rhythm, without deciding to. 4 counts in, 4 counts out, the exact pattern my old running coach had drilled into me during my final year of school, for the last stretch of a long race when your legs stop believing they can carry you any further. It is only a race, I told myself, which made no sense at all, since nothing about this chair or this cuff resembled a race. But the part of my mind that had carried me through countless final stretches did not seem to care about that difference. Pain that follows a pattern is simply another opponent. You do not talk an opponent into stopping, you outlast it. I found the 11th hostile in under 2 seconds. Cadet. The proctor's voice had changed, carrying something new now, something that in a human voice I would have called uncertainty. Intensity has passed the calibration limit set for this test. Do you wish to continue? I became distantly aware that the edges of my vision had taken on a faint red tint, and that my jaw ached from clenching it so hard, and that none of that had actually slowed my hands down at all. How many rounds are left? I asked. 2 remain. Then let's finish it. Somewhere in the gallery, I heard the coalition officer say something sharp in her own language, and half a second later, the translation reached me through the hidden speakers. It is not stopping him. Round 12 arrived, and my hands were no longer entirely steady, but steadiness, it turned out, was never actually the requirement. Accuracy was the requirement, and accuracy lived somewhere deeper than shaking hands, somewhere built from years of practice and habit that pain could not easily reach. Round 13, the final one. I found the hostile, marked it, and the display went dark. The cuff released with a soft click that felt, absurdly, like the best sound I had heard in my entire life. Silence filled the hall afterward, a different kind of silence than before, heavier, stranger. I sat there for a moment, letting my pulse slowly climb back down from somewhere near the ceiling, and I became aware that 200 cadets from 9 different worlds were staring at me the way you stare at something that should not be possible, yet is sitting right there in front of you anyway. I did not know it yet, but that silence was only the beginning of the story, not the end of it. Voss found me afterward in the long corridor outside the hall, his silver skin still pale, his 4 hands still trembling slightly, though not from fear this time. They pushed you past the failure point that 3 separate species set as their own personal limit, he said. You did not ask them to stop. You did not even ask what the limit was supposed to be. I did not know there was one, I admitted. I thought it was only training, something you push through so it never gets to own you later. This is meant to be the hardest thing any cadet faces in 4 years at this academy, Voss said, staring at me as though recalculating something important in his mind. I thought about the last mile of a long race, about exam weeks with almost no sleep, about the summer I had worked long shifts with a sore shoulder, because rent never cared about a sore shoulder. None of that had felt like an ending. It had only ever felt like something you pushed through, because stopping was never truly an option if you wanted to be the kind of person who finished what they started. Where I come from, I said quietly, that felt almost normal. Voss said nothing for a long moment. Then, in a tone that sounded like someone rebuilding an entire idea from the ground up, he said, I am glad your people are not our enemy. Yeah, I said, rubbing the back of my neck where the cuff had been. Me too. That evening, word of what happened in the hall had already spread through the entire academy grounds, faster than any official report could travel. I sat alone in the mess hall, staring at a tray of food I had not touched, when a woman sat down across from me without asking permission first. She introduced herself as Commander Priya Rowan, one of the senior instructors overseeing the Threshold Assessment Program, and her eyes studied me with the careful attention of someone reading a puzzle rather than a person. Cadet Whitfield, she said, do you understand what you did today? I finished a test, I said. You finished a test built to measure breaking points, she said. Every species we have ever recorded reaches a moment where the body simply refuses to continue, no matter what the mind decides. We have never recorded a human reaching that moment, not once, not today. Maybe the machine was set wrong. It was not set wrong. She placed a thin data pad on the table between us, its surface glowing with lines of numbers I did not fully understand. The intensity reached levels that have ended the assessment early for every other species we have tested, some by a wide margin. You kept working through all of it, and your accuracy actually improved as the pain increased. That is not something we expected. That is not something anyone here has ever seen before. I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing at all. I want to understand why, she continued. Not because I doubt what happened, but because if your species truly experiences pain differently, or simply chooses to respond to it differently, that changes how we plan defense strategy for the entire alliance. I do not think I experience pain differently, I said slowly, trying to find honest words. It hurt. It hurt very badly, more than anything I can remember feeling before. I just did not let it decide what I was going to do next. Explain that difference to me, she said, leaning forward slightly. I thought about it for a moment, turning the idea over carefully before speaking. Where I grew up, we are taught early that pain and stopping are 2 separate choices. Pain tells you something is happening. Stopping is a decision you make on your own, based on many things, not just how much something hurts in the moment. We are taught to notice pain without letting it make our decisions for us. It sounds simple when I say it out loud, but most of us practice that skill for years, without even realizing we are practicing it. Long runs, long shifts, long nights before exams, small hard things that build a kind of quiet stubbornness inside you, piece by piece, until it becomes part of how you move through the world. Commander Rowan studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. That quiet stubbornness, as you call it, may be the single most valuable thing your species brings to this alliance. I do not feel very valuable right now, I said honestly. Mostly I feel tired. A small, unexpected smile crossed her face. That is probably the most human thing you have said to me all evening. Over the following days, Something shifted inside the academy that I could feel but could not fully name. Cadets who had avoided the human section before now sat closer to us in the mess hall, watching quietly, sometimes asking careful questions about our training back home. Voss began sitting beside me during lectures without needing an invitation, and slowly, cautiously, we became something like friends, trading stories about our very different worlds during the long breaks between classes. One afternoon, nearly 2 weeks after the assessment, I was called back to the same curved hall, though this time it stood empty, except for Commander Rowan and 2 other instructors I did not recognize, standing near the black chair on the stage. "We are recalibrating the threshold assessment," Rowan told me. "Your results forced us to reconsider the entire scale we have used for years. We would like your permission to study your responses further, under controlled conditions, with proper safety limits this time, so we can better understand what happened and why." "Why do you need my permission for that?" I asked. "You already tested me once without fully explaining what would happen." She had the grace to look genuinely uncomfortable at that. "The rules required a briefing for every cadet before the assessment. Somehow, in your case, that briefing never reached you. That failure was ours, not yours, and it will not happen again to any cadet after you, human or otherwise. I am asking properly this time, with full honesty about what is involved, because I believe what we learn from you could change how every species in this alliance prepares its people for the hardest moments they will ever face." I thought about Voss shaking beside me in that hall, about the Andrei cadets breathing themselves calm before a pain they could not avoid, about the empty chair where a cadet named Sorrel had once sat and never returned. I thought about how frightened this entire academy had been of a test I had barely understood as anything more than a hard morning. "I will help," I said, "but only if it means fewer cadets end up as frightened as Voss was that day. If what happened to me can make this easier for the ones who come after us, then it was worth it." Rowan nodded slowly, something like respect settling into her expression. "I believe it already has." Weeks later, standing at the edge of the training field with Voss beside me, watching a new class of nervous cadets file into the same curved hall for their own version of the assessment, now rebuilt with proper safety limits and honest explanations given well in advance, I felt something settle quietly inside my chest. Not pride exactly, something steadier than that, something closer to purpose. "They look less afraid than we did," Voss said, watching the new cadets take their seats. "Good," I said. "They should be. Fear should never be the thing that decides who is ready and who is not." "And what should decide it then?" Voss asked. "If not fear." I thought about long races and long shifts, and quiet stubbornness passed down through generations without anyone ever writing it in a manual. I thought about a broken arm, and an angry 9-year-old boy who refused to believe a tree had beaten him. "Choice," I said finally. "It should always come down to choice. Pain will always try to make the decision for you if you let it. The whole point is learning never to let it." Voss did not answer right away. Instead, he simply stood beside me in comfortable silence, watching the new cadets settle into seats that no longer carried quite the same weight of dread they once had, and somewhere far across the field, the black chair on the stage sat empty, waiting for its next test, no longer quite as feared as it had been before, because one nervous, unprepared human had walked in without knowing what waited for him, and had simply refused to stop.